Let's talk about book endings. How do you write a really good, strong ending to a story? Last week we talked about ineffective beginnings, things you should not be doing when you're writing the start of a story, and today we're breaking down what makes for a good book ending. So let's talk about what those qualities are, what those things are that really latch on to people and make sure that they are reading to the end and they're happy and all the good things when it comes to writing the end of a story. If you're just jumping in, go ahead and let me know where you're joining me from today. So when it comes to a book's ending, there are a couple of different things to look at. Number one, is it going to be part of a series? If it's part of a series, you really need a cliffhanger. Some people don't do it this way, and you don't always have to, but the thing here is you want the read through. If you end a story and it could end there, like everything's wrapped up, you're good, chances are you're going to see a very big drop off for any second, third, fourth, fifth book in the series. So you want to make sure that you've got an ending that makes them want to read more. It's like the cliffhanger endings of every single chapter you're writing to get them to go to that next page, because if they can close a book and walk away, they will. Now, when I say a cliffhanger ending, what I do not mean is everything should still be up in the air. When it comes to this, you need to wrap up the story you've told, or wrap up the story that you're telling, and then introduce that new cliffhanger. So it is like the end of a TV show. You've wrapped up everything that's happened in that 20-minute or in that 40-minute block of time, whatever TVs are. It's, a half an hour and an hour, and they wrap up everything that has happened, but introduce the thing that's coming next. So when you're writing a story that is part of a series, you definitely have to make sure that you have that intro into the next story. Wrap up everything in a nice, neat bow that you've just done in that story, the problem, the character arcs, all the things, and then introduce the next step. So that is how you're going to get people to read through. Now, if your story is not part of a series, you do need to conclude everything. You make sure that you have some type of satisfying conclusion that wraps everything up, that makes all those threads go together at the end. You have to make sure that people feel like it's a completed story. So when it comes to this, you have to make sure that you are giving them some type of conclusion. Now, depending on what you're writing, there are different things and guidelines that you have to have. So to be a technical romance story, you have to have a happy ending or a happy for now ending. It can't be bad. It can't be, everyone died or people died or there's sad things, or it can't be like me. Which is why my books are not necessarily classified romance. They're not romance specific. They are sci-fi or they're fantasy with romantic elements in them. So a true, if that's the main genre is romance, it has to have happy ever after or happy for now. With anything else, you can do whatever you want. So as long as you conclude the storyline and you really kind of go through all the pieces and you tie up the loose ends, everything makes sense, there are realistic conclusions to it, you're good to go. But that brings us to another point. Depending on what you're publishing and who's in charge of your book, you may have different endings. So I've had a number of friends who've worked with traditional publishers who want the happy for now endings, and they've made them take out all consequences from the story. And that's one of the biggest things that people get raked in reviews for, because this person was horrible and did all these really bad things, and then at the end, nothing bad happened to them. There were no consequences for their actions. So a lot of traditional publishers will make you go with the nice, neat bow and everybody's okay and there are no consequences for our actions, whereas indie does not require that. And so just knowing the path that you're taking really will impact the story that you're telling. And if you are telling a story that's going to have a darker ending or those dark twists, things are not all going to be nice and peachy at the end, you're going to want to consider who you're working with, because not every publisher makes you make it nice and fancy and pretty, but a lot of them do. So you really have to take that into consideration as you're writing your story and as you are working toward publishing your story. So when it comes to writing effective endings, you have to wrap up the story that you're telling. Everything has to make sense. The stepping stones have all led to that final moment, and you're wrapping it up with a nice, neat bow. However, in most cases, if it's a series, you're going to want the cliffhanger for the next section. So you have to make sure that you're moving the story forward and giving them a reason to go on to the next book, because if you don't, they probably won't, and you won't make any sales from that. If you are writing things like romance, you're going to need that happily ever after or happy for now ending. Otherwise, you just have to conclude the story, and most readers most readers, I would say like 90% of readers, do not want the happy endings if it's not realistic. They love happy endings, don't get me wrong, that's not a bad thing. But unrealistic consequences to actions, that's not going to go well for you. So you have to make sure that you have written a book where the consequences are clearly shown and the fallout from whatever has happened, good, bad, or otherwise, is clearly demonstrated inside of your story. So if you've got questions on writing effective book endings, or if you've got things you want to chat about today, I've got a couple of minutes. I am running out for a big major photo shoot as soon as we're done here. So if you've got questions, now's the time. Thank you for the love on the hair today. I just I tried a new waver this morning. I thought it would be fun for our conversation today to have the cute little hair. So we are chatting about endings to books and how to write those effectively. And the best thing that you can be doing is really drawing it together. So you're always writing toward the end of your story. Everything that you do is a stepping stone or a breadcrumb toward your big ending. You have to make sure that you've put the effort into building up to this building up to this ending so that it makes sense, so that it is conclusive, so that it ties up all the little threads that you have planted along the way and it makes sense. You want to make sure that you give some type of ending. So if it's a standalone book, give them the next step. What happens? Where are these characters going? We're not just cutting it off, but what is their next step? Where are they going? What are they doing? What are they probably doing after this point? You want to make sure you're giving them some idea of how their ultimate story is going to conclude. If it's part of a series, you are, of course, using a cliffhanger to move into the next part of that story so that drives them over to the other books. And if you're just jumping in, hello and welcome. We're here for just a couple more minutes. We are answering questions about writing the ends of stories. And we talked a little bit about how you have to conclude everything that you've created inside of the story. So all the storylines, all the plot things that you've created, all the character development, it all has to come together to make sense. There can't be like weird random things stuck into your book that have no purpose. You're always driving toward the end of that story. And if it's part of a series, you are creating that cliffhanger after you've wrapped it up into the next story. So what's going to be the next step? If you are writing a standalone book, you are telling them what's the next step for the characters, even though you're not going to get to see it. You're going to give them an interesting version of what it's going to be. Happy endings sound boring. Well, it depends on the context. I am somebody who very much likes those realistic endings, and 90% of fans very much like the realistic endings. So if you can give consequences to actions, that's good. If you read my books, I have some books that do have nice endings, and the majority of my books are, they're happy, but they've had a lot of scars along the way. So I show you that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Yes, they're okay now that we've concluded this book, yes, they're okay, but they're still going to deal with the ramifications of what happened in the story going forward. So there's still a lot they're going to have to deal with, a lot they're going to have to do. There's going to be a lot of heartache that they have to deal with, a lot of trauma that they have to deal with, but they are safe relatively, or happy relatively. Some of mine are not. Some of them are sad, and then some of them are just, congratulations, we did the thing, we got it. But it's not quite as mean as all of the rest of my stories. But we always want to make sure that we are doing realistic writing. So we try to avoid fluff. We try to avoid things for the sake of just being nice, and you want to make sure that it's going to be a strong, solid ending. Because if you've given them a good story until the ending and then it's just a weak ending, they're not going to be happy. And if that's the last thing that they see, the review's not going to be so pretty. So you got to be careful with that. Can a book that's wrapped up and meant to be a standalone still get a sequel, or would that ruin the original story? No, you can definitely do a spin-off. You can definitely do more. The catch is, if people think that the story's done, they're not going to move on to the next one. So if you do write a story, let's use some of mine for examples. Some of my books I've written as standalones, and then people requested the sequels or the spin-offs. So it's a concluded story, it's concluded. I can spin that off. I'm in the process of spinning some of these off, but it means I'm going to have to do a lot of heavy work in my back matter of my book to let people know there is more. You have to be very clear that there is going to be more, because if you're not aggressively in their face about it in the back of the book, they're not going to get the next one because they think it's concluded. So yes, you can spin off. Yes, you can extend a series. You just have to do a lot of extra marketing work to make sure that it's going to work for you. All right, so when it comes to endings, we are as going to be as conclusive as possible. We're going to tie together all the threads that we weaved while we were going. If it's going into a series, you want to make sure you have that cliffhanger to make sure you get those sales. And if it's a standalone, you want to make sure you show a little bit of what their future is going to be like, just so people can see where those characters that they love are going to go in the future, or kind of give them at least a direction they can be going in. If you have more questions about how to write a strong ending to a story, I would love to get those answered for you. Go ahead and drop those down in the comments below. I am off because I gotta go to an apple orchard pumpkin patch and take all the pretty photos. I'm super excited, and I will be showing you those in the next couple of days. Until then, please remember we have an open Q&A Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern over on TikTok Live. We're gonna be doing some cool stuff on Amazon live streaming and YouTube live streaming as well. And of course, you can drop questions on my TikTok, on my Instagram, where you can email me, DM me, whatever, to get those questions answered over the next couple of days and weeks. And I got some cool stuff dropping for you in TikTok and Reels as well. So I will see you for our next Instagram live stream next Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, and open Q&A on TikTok. It has been a while. Hello, and thank you for joining. Sorry you're at the very end. Watch the replay, and I'll see you in the next live stream. Bye, friends.